Right, great. It's lovely to see everybody. So let's get right to it, Steve. Defence, it's a big undertaking in the UK. Can you give us a sense of what the scale is?
Yeah, absolutely, Tim. First of all, good morning, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here at AI UK this morning, and just to try and lift the lid a little bit on the science inside defence and security. So, notwithstanding everything that I'm sure you'll have read in the media about, the size of the UK armed forces and the fact that we're at some of the lowest levels we've been for some time, defence is still a huge, huge undertaking. There are 250,000 people that are working as part of the Ministry of Defence, about 185,000 people in our armed forces and about 65,000 civil servants that are undertaking a whole range of different tasks. We've got about 3,500 land platforms, about 80 maritime platforms, nearly 800 air platforms, about 550 fixed wing and about 250 helicopters and rotary wing. And I think there's a lot of kind of maybe misunderstanding and maybe sort of Hollywood thinking about what our armed forces do. There are actually 8 different tasks that the armed forces undertake. Obviously defending the homeland and the UK's overseas interests, but a whole range of other things. So things like global strategic intelligence, helping us keep track of what is going on around the world. International defence engagement. Actually, a lot of our armed forces spend time with other nations, helping train and professionalise their armed forces. And actually, for me, one of the most important things about what we do in the MOD is deterring conflict. If we can help deter, de-escalate conflicts, that is ultimately the best outcome for all of us. The last thing I want to say on this is that, by and large, our armed forces are made up of people just like you and me. Often they're men and women in their 20s and 30s. We put them in some of the most challenging situations that anybody on earth is having to make decisions about. So I find that incredibly motivating as a scientist and an engineer, really trying to make sure that those people that are putting themselves in harm's way to keep all of us safe have got the best possible science and technology support. So, yeah, I hope that gives you a bit of a flavour for...
Yeah, no, that's really good. And you mentioned science and technology. So we've talked about defence and this amazing effort to keep citizens in the UK safe and to deter conflict as much as to make sure that we're adequately protected. Science and technology presumably plays a really big part in that. So can you explain a little about the role of S&T for defence?
Yeah, so I'm really proud to work for an organisation you might not have heard of. It's called Dstl, which stands for the Defence Science and Technology Laboratory. You might have heard of GCHQ or MI5 or MI6. We are another government agency that is doing work that is genuinely of national and international importance. There's about 5,000 of us that work at Dstl, and we cover everything from cybersecurity, space systems, chemical and biological defence, counter-terrorism, and the area that I'm responsible for leading, which is AI and data science. Again, as a scientist, I love working at Dstl because I can really see the benefit of the research that I'm doing put into practice in real-world scenarios. So I would say maybe 5 or 10 times a year, I sit down with my family to watch the news at 10, and there will be a headline that either I've had some small part to play in or people that I know have had some part to play in. So, recent examples, I'm sure many of you will recall the poisonings of the Skripals in Salisbury. Dstl was the nerve centre of that operation. It was fascinating working at Porton Down during that period. It was our scientists that identified what the agent was that had been used. A lot of the people you saw in those scary-looking suits were actually Dstl scientists who, were going and helping, using all of the expertise that we have to help with the clear-up operation. Another example you might not be aware of is around COVID. The science and technology community, particularly in defence and security, was really mobilised during COVID. A really nice example was one of the teams I work with became the single source of the truth for COVID data. So you'll recall a lot of the epidemiological models that were being run. Turns out, at the start of the crisis, all of those epidemiological models had different assumptions about the initial conditions and the number of cases. So we had a team of statisticians that got on a treadmill they could never get off, which was every day they had to aggregate all of the different data sets and give out the official government version that then all of the other epidemiological models run. So for me, I find that really rewarding. The final point I want to say is, given that we're here at AI UK, Dstl was a founding partner in establishing the Alan Turing Institute. We've been working really closely with Tim and the defence and security team. So the partnership that we have between us at Dstl and the Turing really is vital. And we've also been funding, for example, research centres. So you may have seen them in the exhibition, one homed out of the Turing, and then one homed out of Exeter University.
That's great. And AI. We're here to talk about AI. Can you give us a sense of the thinking that defence puts in around AI, and also perhaps what the biggest challenge is to AI for defence?
Yeah, so we really see AI as a ubiquitous technology that is both presenting, really great opportunities to help us improve the kind of support that I was just talking about to our armed forces, but also new threats that we need to be able to counter to help keep us all safe. I struggle to think of areas of defence that aren't impacted by AI. So just to give you some examples, command and control. That is incredibly important, helping our commanders have the right information, helping them make right decisions, helping them understand different courses of action. Intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance. That's your eyes and ears, and helping commanders sift through lots of data. And actually what we want is for them to be spending their time using their judgment, their human intuition, their experience of military environments to make the best possible decision. If we can use AI to remove some of the burden from them, that's fantastically helpful. Lots of other areas, logistics, incredibly important. Helping. You've seen how Amazon and Ocado and all kinds of different organisations have used AI to help optimise their logistics. That massively matters in a defence context. Cyber security, countering disinformation, electronic warfare. I could go on, but it really is a very ubiquitous technology, and it really has a very broad range of different applications. The thing that I'm sure will pop into most people's minds will be all the discussion around killer robots and lethal autonomous weapon systems. But for me, that is a tiny part. It's a really important and really serious part of what we do, but it's all the other applications that, for me, are actually much more impactful and are really going to help us get the best possible outcome in these challenging situations.
No, that's great. So we called this session the secret session. Steve and I had some fun because he tried to send me the questions last night, and the Dstl system wouldn't allow it because it had the word secret in it. Previously, we've had to rename Secret Santa there. So it strikes me that there are things that you probably can't talk about, but have you got any examples or anything of systems that, or ways in which you're using AI at the moment?
Yeah, so I'll give you maybe a couple. So the first is a system called Sapient. So I would like you to imagine that you are you've been given the job of trying to protect the perimeter of a base. You're in a room, you've got a bank of video cameras in front of you, it's hot, it's dusty, you're tired because you haven't slept properly for weeks. How well do you think you would do at monitoring that bank of video screens, looking for the 30 seconds of really important information you need to see in an 8-hour shift? If you're anything like me, you would be dreadful at it. So that is the problem that we are trying to solve with a system that we've designed called Sapient. Sapient uses AI and autonomy to orchestrate an integrated sensor network. So rather than giving an operator a bank of video screens and video feeds that they have to monitor, we are using AI both at the sensor level but also at the kind of the fusion level to present an integrated operating picture to the commander. We can fine-tune the kind of the thresholds so that we don't give the commander too many false alarms and too many false alerts. And really, we're trying to kind of lower the cognitive burden. So we've demonstrated Sapient. We did it in Portsmouth probably about 18 months ago or so now. We had over 30 different systems from all kinds of different industry vendors, all kinds of different nations, and we were able to show how they could all work together as one kind of integrated sensor system. We've actually recently published the architecture for Sapient as a BSI standard. So if you're interested in sensor systems, I'd definitely recommend looking up the Sapient architecture, because that's actually being looked at now by NATO as the system that they want to use to integrate their systems. Another example I'll maybe just touch on briefly is some of the work we're doing on counter-disinformation. It's obviously an election year, huge amount of concern about deep fakes and algorithmically generated misinformation. We've actually had a partnership between Dstl and the US agency DARPA, who have been investing significant amounts of money in trying to develop different kinds of approaches to identify deepfaked images, deepfake video, deepfake audio, deepfake text. And we've been able to help and support our US colleagues by assessing the different techniques and really trying to build up a kind of a best-in-class set of detectors that are now being explored by the UK government for our Defending Democracy Task Force. So, yeah, two hopefully interesting examples.
That's great. And in general, what sort of benefits are you hoping to get out of AI for defence?
So I would say probably three things. For me, the single biggest thing is decision making. If we can use AI to do some of the low cognition, still very burdensome tasks for our decision makers, whether they're in Whitehall or whether they're deployed in some kind of hot and dusty environment, and we can use that to free them up to spend more of their time making sense of the situation, thinking through different hypotheses, different courses of action, maybe, for example, using deep reinforcement learning to war game out different scenarios, better understand the kind of the risks and the opportunities of those different courses of action. That will be really transformational. Too much of our decision-making process is currently spent, trying to pull together the information you need, trying to get some kind of visualization that might help you make sense of it. That is absolutely slap bang in the middle of what AI can really help with. Two other things quickly. So the first is about scale. If we can help every man and woman in our armed forces achieve more, either through digital systems or through greater use of robotics and autonomous systems, that clearly massively matters, and really helping use AI and autonomy as a force multiplier. And then finally, just what might seem quite sort of banal, but MOD is it spends £50 billion of our taxpayers' money every year. It is a huge and complex undertaking. We're procuring some of the most complicated systems that exist anywhere on the planet. We've got all kinds of HR and commercial processes and big contracts and stuff. If we can use AI in what you might call the back office to help the MOD be more efficient and effective in terms of its use of taxpayers' money, that then frees up more money to go into the front line or more money to be spent elsewhere in government. So, yeah, I'd say decision-making, scale, and efficiency.
Okay, no, that's really helpful. So what's different? So one of the things that I'm interested in is the aspects of safety and ethical appropriateness when you're thinking about AI for defense and security. And I guess the first question that springs to mind is, to what extent is defense and security AI a different sort of beast from other industry sectors?
Yeah, so I think there are some real fundamental differences in terms of applying AI in the context of defence and security. In fact, one of the things I've brought with me, actually, to put it up on the screen, is something we published recently called the Defence AI Playbook. And this is a document, you can all download it on the internet, on .gov.uk. It contains all kinds of use cases and descriptions of how we're thinking about applying AI to defence problems. But the one thing that comes out time and time again is the importance of trust. Our military commanders are, first of all, they are responsible for the operations that they are conducting. If they do not understand, if they do not trust, if they do not have confidence in a system that they are going to be using, it is not going to get deployed. The seriousness with which our military conduct their business, really, every time I see it, I'm really impressed. They really take these sorts of decisions incredibly seriously. So how we ensure the safety, the reliability of these systems is incredibly important. So it was good. I was here yesterday and we had John McDermott on stage, who we've been working with for quite a few years now, and our whole AI safety is actually an area we've been working on for a long, long time. We are currently working on something called a joint service publication for dependable AI. That sounds incredibly boring, but it is incredibly important. So we've recently published this document around MOD, and it sets the standards for how every military project is going to have to assure the safety and the trustworthiness of the systems that we deploy. I think it's actually really world-leading, the approach that we're taking in the UK. A couple of other things I might just mention. So one of the other things is around data. If you're training a cat and dog detector, you've got lots of data to work with. Some of the things that we're interested in are much sparser data sets. So looking at how we can maybe use transfer learning to kind of build upon existing models, and then with the smaller data sets achieve good performance against the kinds of things that we're interested in, how we can use synthetic data. We're also doing a lot of work on gathering kind of good quality defence data sets. So, for example, if you're interested in overhead imagery, there's a great data set the Americans have produced called XView that anybody can download. It's got, I think, like 1.4 million square kilometres of satellite imagery, loads of labelled objects in the data set. There's some really good quality data sets out there. We've recently run a trial called Wintermute, where we had lots of different industry partners all collaborating together. We simulated a beach landing and had lots of different sensors gathering a really good data set that's going to be used. Then the final thing I'll just mention is it's not a one-player game. Often in military context, you've got a capable adversary. They might be trying to deceive or conduct adversarial attacks against your AI systems. So making sure that we really understand the vulnerabilities in these systems, making sure that we can really engineer them to be reliable, even when you've got a technically capable adversary trying to undermine your AI. Those are some of the things that I think are different.
Right. And so that's about making sure that these things work appropriately and responsibly. The ethics, defense and security, it's a contentious area for applying AI. So what are you doing, what's Dstl doing to ensure that we are doing things in an ethical way?
Yeah. So probably the best place to start is actually just to really acknowledge just how vital the Turing has been to some of our work around AI ethics. We have some Turing Defence Ethics Fellows that work very closely with us, and we also have established an MOD ethics panel, which is working at the most senior levels in defence, giving kind of robust challenge and helping develop our ethical approach. a couple of things I would say. So first of all, we're trying to be really transparent and really open with the general public about some of the challenges and some of the decisions that we need to make. So we recently published, hopefully it'll come up on the screen in a minute, a document we call Ambitious, Safe and Responsible. Again, this is available on .gov.uk, and it provides, really transparent kind of explanations of our policies around AI in the defence area. A particularly important part of the Ambitious, Safe and Responsible document is MOD's AI ethical principles. So lots of organisations have ethical principles, Google, Microsoft, many others. We have published a set of ethical principles that the Ministry of Defence has committed to. These overlay the ethics of just warfare with the ethics of AI. And we had a lot of support from our colleagues at the Turing, the Centre for Data Ethics and Innovation, and elsewhere in developing these ethical principles. They cover things like human centricity, responsibility, making sure that humans are accountable for the decisions they're making, understanding, so the kind of explainability, how we help the commanders understand the systems that they're using, harm and bias minimization, so really making sure that the systems we are building minimize the harm. I mean, obviously, warfare, people get hurt, people get killed, but really looking at how we can minimize the harm, minimize the bias in the systems. And then the final one is about reliability. So, we have ethicists that are embedded within our teams. And actually, one of the things, we might come back to this later, is how multidisciplinary our teams are. So it is not just sort of software engineers sort of sat in dark rooms developing systems. We have very multidisciplinary teams, and ethicists are absolutely part of that. And actually, I feel quite proud again that, for example, we've had Dstl experts testify at the UN on some of these kind of contentious ethical questions. So really proactively engaging in some of the international debates about AI ethics.
That's really good. We've got questions coming in. I'm going to ask a couple more questions of my own, and then we'll go to questions from the audience and from Slido. So AI sounds great. Why aren't we using it more widely? What's holding us back from using it more widely in defence?
So I think the first part to that question is some of what I was talking about in terms of trust and assurance. We understand defence use cases are really challenging the state of the art in AI, and as I hope I'm communicating, we're trying to be really responsible, really thoughtful about how we're applying these. But also we have a phrase that we use within defence that we call the AI paradox, and the AI paradox goes that it's deceptively easy to produce extremely compelling proofs of concept with powerful results, but at the same time it is fiendishly difficult to deploy those proofs of concept at scale across a large and complex enterprise like the Ministry of Defence. And for me, that really resonates in that over my career as a scientist, I've done all kinds of experiments. We've had soldiers running around trials areas, we've had people in labs, you get some really good results at the end of it, everyone high-fives each other, says, haven't we done a brilliant job? And then a couple of years later, it's gone nowhere, and you've just not been able to scale it. So understanding how we can take these things from the lab into real operational deployments is absolutely, that's probably one of the most important issues that we're facing. We have a way we like to think about this, we call our building blocks. And these building blocks recognise that AI is a socio-technical system. It is not a set of software, a set of technologies. You need to think about the data, you need to think about the computational platform that you're deploying in, you need to think about the algorithm you're using, you need to think about the standards, the architectures, the interfaces, you need to think about the ethics, the legal, the policy issues, you need to think about the end user and what they need, you need to think about the tests and assurance. So we've got this framework we use called our building blocks. I've put up on screen here a link to something we call biscuit books. Some of you might have come across these already. They're publications we issue out of Dstl that help people understand different topics around AI. And the one I've highlighted in red there is the one about the building blocks. And if there's one message to take away, I'm sure most people in the audience would agree with this, is that AI is a socio-technical problem.
And they're called that because you can read them whilst you're having a coffee and a biscuit, I think. So,
Yep.
and so you, last question from me before we go to the audience questions. You work at Dstl, but you also work in the Defence AI Centre. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so the Defence AI Centre was an initiative that was announced by the Prime Minister in the 2021 Integrated Review. It is a partnership between the scientists at Dstl, the engineers and the digital specialists at an organisation called Defence Digital, and our acquisition organisation, something called Defence Equipment and Support. And that's really important. It goes back to this point about AI being a socio-technical system. We need to bring together all of the different stakeholders that have got a role to play in delivering AI in a safe, responsible and ethical fashion, but doing that at scale and pace so that our armed forces get the really important support that they need. So the Defence AI Centre, that's been running for about 2 years now. It's really, I think, one of the most kind of exciting initiatives that's going on in defence at the moment. What I really love about it is it's very collaborative at heart. So we are working very closely with our industry partners, and we actually have joint government industry teams. We're working very closely with our academic partners, and particularly the Defence AI research team at the Turing and the Defence Data Research Centre led out of the University of Exeter. And we're also working really closely with our international partners. So we've currently got teams of scientists out in America at a big trial looking at a joint, we call it a robust AI and autonomy toolbox. So trying to take the kind of best of breed different algorithms. So the Defence AI Centre has really got this important role in defence. Again, I've brought a QR code with me just so you can find out a little bit more information. There is, I mean, I said at the beginning how big an organisation defence is, 250,000 people. Trying to keep track of what everyone's doing on AI across defence is a fool's errand. There's just so much innovation, so many teams, and actually that is great. What we want are innovation teams that are really close to the end users, that really understand the end users' problems, that can really work closely with them against real data sets. So that's a great thing. The DAKE's role is to try and bring that kind of cohering function, try and bring those people together, not to do all of Defence's AI work in one place, to be the champion that really kind of leads Defence's overall approach to AI, to be the enabler that makes it easy for more and more people to be using this kind of powerful technology, and then finally to innovate. We feel like you can't be credible in championing and enabling AI if you're actually doing some. So some of the projects that I've been talking about are joint projects that we're working with the DAKE, trying to get stuff out of the lab into the hands of end users. So.
Thanks so much, Steve. So I'd encourage you to put your hands up. I'm going to start with a Slido question, but then I'd like to come. We've got 2 roving microphones, I think. So please put your hands up if you've got a question, and then we'll come. Excellent. So first question. A couple of questioners here are pointing out that a number of our adversaries are less ethically challenged. They have looser ethical standards. So does that put them at an advantage?
Yeah, so I think we need to be really clear that AI is a very powerful but inherently a dual-use technology, like almost every other technology that's come before it. It can be used for good, it can be used for harm, you know, really making sure that we're clear-eyed in terms of the kinds of threats, how these things are being misused. You know, the thing that I worry the most about is kind of rogue states and how they might be employing this technology. But you know, things, terrorism, cybercrime. You know, we mustn't be kind of rose-tinted glasses expecting that everyone's going to be approaching this in the same way that we do. What I would say, though, is that I think it's critically important that the UK shows international leadership in terms of what a liberal, democratic model of adoption for AI in a defence and security context looks like. We always work within in international humanitarian law. That's, we think, a really good kind of framework for how we operate. But we need to make sure that we are not kind of shackling our armed forces in terms of some of the threats that they come up against. So it's a really important issue, and this for me is one of the reasons actually why it's really good that we're having this conversation here today, because the UK needs to be leading the world in terms of what responsible and ethical use of this technology looks like in a defence and security context. We've got a very strong defence sector in the UK. We've got an incredibly strong AI sector in the UK. We need those communities to come together and to have, grown-up, serious conversations about how we take this technology forward and how we counter some of these challenges. So, that's why I feel motivated to work in this area, and it's something that I hope lots of people in the audience will be keen to be involved in.
No, that's really good. Okay, let's have a question from the audience. Elaine.
To do anything? No, good. Thank you very much. It's been a very interesting conversation, and I work at the Turing, and I am always impressed by my colleagues in the Defense and Security program with how thoughtful they are about the ethics, about human in the loop, and all of that. So nice to see it echoed here. I'd like to return to misinformation, though, because as wearing my citizen hat, that always makes me nervous. And so could you say a little bit more about what does it mean to use AI to try to counter misinformation? And is that about stopping the citizenry from being exposed to things that aren't true? And then when I think about, with my social science hat on, I think, but we've looked at so many other periods of the state, even in great democracies like the UK and America, and seen that states often at one moment think something's not true, but it ends up being a bit ideological on the part of the state. So I wonder, is the approach kind of stopping information, sort of a la China? Or is it in a paternalistic way, or is it, and could it be, about providing counter information and kind of in the spirit of John Stuart Mill, like having a marketplace of ideas and growing the intelligence of our citizens to be more discerning rather than being paternalistic? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's a really great question. I mean, I would say writ large, this is one of the big kind of challenges for our whole generation, not just in the defence and security context, but in terms of, our whole kind of democratic system. What I would say, there's a really nice kind of analogy. There's a chap called Bob Work. I'm not sure if you've ever came across him, but he was the former Deputy Defence Secretary in the Pentagon, and he described it as being, we're currently in a competition of ideas and a competition of values between a kind of more authoritarian approach to restricting the flow of information and a more kind of liberal democratic approach to the flow of information. And, for me, this is where I think we really need to have the confidence in freedom of speech and all of the freedoms that we all enjoy. But, where there are that things that have been generated for ill intent, it's very difficult to define, but certainly within the defence community, we've seen over the past few years this sort of rise in what we call grey zone warfare or sub-threshold warfare, where different states are trying to exploit these things to generate advantage. So I think it's really important that we educate people about, critical thinking, that they're really kind of understanding the provenance of the information that we've seen. I have seen some really great kind of technical solutions to this problem, although I firmly believe it's inherently a socio-technical problem. We're not going to solve this purely with technology, but things like kind of embedding the provenance of the digital information in kind of cryptographically secure ways, so that you can see how images have been or other kinds of media have been manipulated at different stages of their lifespan. Things where we can at least be clear with people that a piece of information has been algorithmically generated, and then they can use their own judgment as to how much reliance they want to put on that. So, for example, you may have seen the deep fake of President Zelensky in the early days of the Ukraine conflict, which was encouraging everyone to lay their arms down and go home. It was a very crude deep fake and didn't have any traction, but that technology is developing at a frightening pace. So I think these kinds of techniques like watermarking, like understanding the provenance of the information, like being able to algorithmically assess the degree to which information has been either purely AI generated or has been edited using AI. There are no silver bullets. It's a really difficult problem, and I think we're going to have to take a spectrum of techniques at it, but it's something that we're doing a lot of work on in Dstl.
And I'd agree. This stuff is difficult because you have the information that is deliberately put out that is misleading, is deceitful, that disinformation, but then it's quickly picked up by well-meaning people who are trying to understand where the truth lies, and this becomes their genuine belief, and then they pass that on, and the majority of the stuff that we see in social media is that misinformation rather than the original disinformation. And there's a question about to what extent can you alter the conversation without it being censorship? Because that's a really difficult territory, and I don't think anybody wants to be censoring people. But we want safe spaces, and we want to foster the right norms. So I don't think that there are any easy answers here. It is something that we are feeling our way towards, but we better do it quickly because there's a general election coming up in the UK, and we need to solve something. I'll go to a Slido, and then we'll have another question from the floor. This one gets the most votes so far. How do you go about defining acceptable error thresholds for AI in work where errors can have serious impact?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things I would say here. The first is that ultimately these systems are used within a clear legal framework and within clear rules of engagement that our commanders will be operating within. So, this might be something that people that aren't so familiar with defence maybe don't quite understand. The rules of engagement for the military are essential for every operation that they conduct, and the kind of authority of the commander to make operational decisions. Every decision that you're making is a risk in a military context, but they have to be able to show why they've made that decision, how they've accepted that risk. So I think this is why this process of assurance and trust building with the commanders is so important. We can't sit in isolation as sort of scientists and engineers thinking how we're going to do this. We have to work with the commanders, understand what their level of risk that they are comfortable with within their kind of rules of engagement. The other thing I would say is that particularly weapon systems, but things in that vein have to go through very strict legal reviews. So within the Geneva Conventions, there's something called Article 36, where we have lawyers that will be scrutinising different systems before they're introduced into service. So this will all come, within that broader kind of framework. The point I'd like to make, though, is, we often have these sort of discussions about biases and systems and, what's acceptable error. And I worry that we hold AI to a different standard. All of us are biased. All of us are error prone. What actually reassures me slightly is I can measure the F number of a machine learning model. I can maybe do that in a repeatable fashion. What's my F number? Anybody know? If you can measure these things, you can improve them. So I just think we need to be careful in this discussion that we are not thinking about these things in absolutist terms. It's about relative terms. If we could use these systems in a way that reduces the likelihood of a commander making a mistake, that is a reduction in harm. That's probably all I'd say.
Yeah, brilliant. Questions? Where's the microphone? I can see lots of hands. Have we got somebody that's got both a hand and... Excellent.
Yeah, I have both. Yeah, thank you for the really insightful comments. I wanted to pitch back to the safe and responsible standards you set out. And one of the challenges that you echoed in this report was the unpredictability of the systems. And that's a greater challenge seen by the AI community as a whole, because this is really saying, will these systems work? The unpredictability of them. Given the safety critical nature of defense, how do you actually establish the safe operating bounds? Will the system work, and will it not? You mentioned the F ranges, and maybe you're referencing, the F1 score.
Yeah.
But to derive that, use data sets of, the known landscape we know, but that doesn't necessarily reflect the edge cases that we'll see in the field. So how do you really establish this safe operating range?
Yeah. So the joint service publication that I mentioned earlier on is our policy for how we're addressing exactly that problem. So you can never eliminate risk entirely, but we need to understand, first of all, the different use cases and the different levels of risk. And I think, we would apply a different level of assurance to a safety critical system that we would apply to non-safety critical systems. And we need to be careful that we're applying an amount of assurance that's commensurate with the level of risk that's being applied. Within our joint service publication, there's a whole range of things from, kind of harms analysis to understanding those kind of statistical kind of rates that need to be undertaken. So, we are, I'd say, in the foothills of this. And, it's one of the reasons why I'd say that defence is maybe being more cautious with adopting AI than some other sectors. But, we are really thinking about this. We're trying to put in place good best practice that can at least provide kind of evidence-based safety cases for why systems have been designed. So, in a sense, this is nothing new for defence in that we operate all kinds of safety critical systems, and we've actually got very mature approaches to test and evaluation where we'll test all kinds of different systems. But absolutely, AI and autonomy does introduce new challenges into that test and evaluation. So I think we're being cautious. We're learning and developing, and as I said, I think this joint service publication really is a good step forward because it gives us a baseline for how we're managing this, and we'll keep learning as we go.
No, that's great. Thanks, Steve. So we're into the last 5 minutes now. I've got a question here that's quite popular. It's the SQEP. So for those of you who aren't aware of all of the various abbreviations used in the military, SQEP is suitably qualified and experienced people. And the question here is, what is MOD Dstl doing to recruit, retrain and upskill staff developing AI and working with AI?
So if you ask me one thing that defence could do to improve its ability to adopt AI, it would be this. We are only as good as the people and the expertise that we can draw upon. And it's a team sport, okay? So, we have got some very capable people in Dstl that have got real experience of doing this, but both kind of longer term research and real like short term support to ops type stuff. But we are quite a small part of the MOD. So how we work with our industry and academic partners is really critically important. So as I said earlier, we're putting a lot more effort into like joint teams where we've got people from industry and academia working alongside Dstl scientists. We are also really looking at how we can encourage more, some people call them zigzag careers. So we would love to see more people who have maybe done a few years working in a tech company, coming to work inside government for 18 months, 2 years, going back out into the tech sector. We'd like to see more kind of visiting academic positions where we can get people security cleared. We've got all kinds of stuff going on, but this is probably the one issue that worries me the most, is just making sure that we can bring the right talent to bear. But for me, it's very much a team sport. Government can't do this on its own. It needs the whole sort of community to come together.
No, thank you. Apologies to those. There are some amazing questions on the Slido thing. If we had 2 more hours, but I'd like to finish with one question from the audience, and then I want to give Steve just a couple of minutes in case he's got any last messages. So we've got a microphone to question.
Hello. Hello. Hi, Steve. Love your work. Great conversation. Thank you very much. I would like to unpack that commanders, army commanders thing that you talked about, and hopefully try to sort of relate it to the human in the loop approach that you mentioned. How do you manage the commanders' expectations of AI? What's their level of understanding, awareness, and how do you manage that in trying to develop a human-centric technology? But are they in the loop? Are we informing their understanding?
So I think it's a really good question, and it's something that MOD has absolutely recognised. So we're currently putting in training for all of our commanders to help them understand AI. So we have staff courses where people go to kind of get qualified as they go up different commands. We're looking at how we can introduce more AI training into those staff courses, really helping them. They don't need to be technical experts in understanding, how to tune the hyperparameters on a machine learning model, but they do need to understand the principles of how the systems that they're going to increasingly be relying on will operate. So I'd say at the moment there's lots of green shoots across defence, lots of good interventions. One thing that personally I find really encouraging is a lot of our senior leaders. In fact, all of our 3 and 4 stars, so the most senior, busy people in defence, are investing time in learning about AI. So it really is something that I think everybody in defence is already sort of beginning to learn about and will become more and more pervasive as we go forward.
That's brilliant. This has been a fantastic conversation, Steve. I'm very grateful for your time. Do you have any last messages?
Yeah, so the last thing I wanted to say, this has come out a few times, but defence and security matters to every single person in this room. We all want to, enjoy, a peaceful life. We want to have the freedoms that we all enjoy. That doesn't come for free. And for me, our armed forces are putting themselves in harm's way to keep us all safe. We in Dstl are trying to use science and technology to help, deter conflict, to help make sure that we're prepared for future threats. So I just really wanted to finish by saying, whether you're a PhD student or partway through your academic careers, whether you're an established kind of academic, whether you're a startup, whether you're an industry provider, AI is an inherently dual-use technology. We have to think about what the defence and security issues are, please, do get involved, particularly with the Defence and Security Programme at the Alan Turing Institute, particularly with our Defence AI research centres and our Defence data research centres. They're all out in the exhibition, because this is something that we all need to work together if we're going to get the kind of good outcomes that we all want to see.
Fantastic, thanks. Steve Meers, thanks so much.